and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Siobhan Holt, Deputy Editor at PRWeek, and today's host. In this episode, we're looking at client and agency relationships, and it's great to welcome Angela Balakrishnan, who is the Executive Director of Strategic Comms and Public Affairs at the Information Commissioner's Office. It's great to have you here today, Angela. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's kick off then. So to start, could you explain a bit about your role and your agency setup?
Yep, so let me kick off by describing who we are, because maybe not many of your listeners will be familiar with the ICO, or they might be familiar from a scary point of view, but I can assure you now we're not scary and we're not dull. So we are the UK's data protection regulator, so we look after data protection, or GDPR as you might be more familiar with, and my teams help people and businesses understand what their information rights are all about, but more than that, we actually try and help them care so that they can act on those rights, they know how to do the right thing, and then they can understand how the ICO's work is there to help them. So a bit about our setup. As you said, I look after comms and public affairs. I would say collectively I've got about a team of 60, which probably sounds quite large, but we do a lot of things. I would say pretty much everything in-house, and we operate on quite a tight public sector budget. So my teams cover everything from strategic comms and comms business partners. We look after our strategic planning, our campaign development and often delivery. We'll look after things like press office, media relations, both proactive and reactive, social media, digital. We look after our website, all our editorial review and content, so making sure everything that goes up on that website or that we put out makes sense and can be clearly understood by the audiences that need to read them. We do our own events, speech writing, graphic design. I think I've covered it all on the comms side. And then on the public affairs side, we'll look after our relationships with government, parliamentarians. I have teams in the 3 nation offices as well, looking after our stakeholders there, and all our community and civil society engagement as well.
That's a big old operation that you're running there. How does it split then with things like social media aspects and the different elements within comms? How have you got that set up?
So our social media team sits as part of our wider digital team, and the way I've set up the comms team is we've got the media and what we call our delivery arm, so they will sort of execute on lots of our strategic work, and then you've got the strategic sort of side that help to be the eyes and ears into the business, so they know what's coming. They can be the kind of voice at the table right from the outset of the work, so that comms is like shaping like the work that we're doing rather than just sort of like a service function at the end or like an afterthought at the end. But the way that we set up in our team is having sort of mini project teams essentially, so that everything that we do is collaborative. So it's not just like a passover or a siloed kind of way of working that one team does the strategic part and the planning and then they hand over to the others to deliver. As soon as sort of work is initiated, a little sort of project team will form to make sure that all parts of the puzzle can kind of come together to provide that kind of 360 thinking to the work that we want to do and that we're kind of planning, executing together.
And is that same sort of style also for your crisis as well? Do you have specific people that are responsible for that?
No, we don't have specific people who are responsible for that. I would say when a crisis happens, we will pull together like a crisis kind of project team, a crisis working group that brings together the different disciplines and experts that we need, not just across my teams, but across the wider organisation. And they'll sort of be, a little hub that will work on that issue as and when it occurs.
Brilliant. You mentioned there, though, that it's quite across all the nation, shall we say. So how do you manage that from a manager's point of view?
Yeah, so we've really had to make hybrid working work. So our head offices are based in the northwest, just outside of Manchester, although we'll be moving to Manchester next year. And then I'm based in the London office. There's quite a few of the team who are based here with me. And then we've got offices in Belfast, Edinburgh and Cardiff. So our staff aren't always going to be in the same location at the same time. So we've had to kind of really think about how we work across being in person and online. And I would say there's a few things that we really try to be conscious and intentional about. So obviously there's like the ways of working things. So every morning we'll meet as a whole directorate for our morning huddles. That's obviously based around sort of what's happened in the news, what's happened externally, and how that might be shaping what we might be doing that day. And it really helps, I guess, get a bit of a temperature check and make sure everyone's sort of pulling in the right direction and sets the focus for the day. We meet once a week, again, whether that's teams who will be in the office together or online, but will come together hybridly to help plan and look ahead. So we're not just sort of dealing with the here and now, we're kind of thinking about 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of what's coming down the pipeline. And that really allows us to connect sort of work that's happening in mini project teams at that grander scale and bring that kind of ideation together again to just test our thinking and make sure we're not sort of missing any opportunities or any sort of blind spots. We've developed things like Sparks, which I love. It's sort of done by the team, for the team. It's sort of 15 minutes ways of injecting some learning, insight, inspiration that we can kind of share and plug into our daily work. And then, of course, we do need to come together at points. So we'll either organise for those of us to meet in specific office locations, or like little mini teams will get together if they're working on a project, or if they're doing sort of filming for social media or content collection, or working on a particular sort of high-profile media issue, then they'll gather together in an office location for that piece of work or on that day. I would say the thing that's really helped us is like really thinking about the behaviours that we want to cultivate as a team, because if we are going to be working from different locations and using hybrid, we've really had to think about how we build trust, how we build strong relationships, even just things like the art of really clear communication, making sure that we are sort of collaborative in everything that we do, how we bring people in, how we share information. So behaviours, I would say, has been a lot of the kind of success behind how we work and making sure that those behaviours, filter through every part of the team. I would say as like a leader as well, I've really had to think about how I kind of show up and how I set really clear expectations, making sure that I'm sort of continuously reinforcing sort of what direction we're heading in, encouraging the team to sort of speak up and ask why if something doesn't make sense, rather than struggle behind their laptop, especially if they're working at home, and making sure that I'm explaining exactly why we're doing something and what we're trying to achieve. So again, those expectations are really clear. But I mean, I would say it's built on a shared load of trust, really strong relationships, but we've reaped the benefits as well. I mean, I get to work with so many different people from all corners of the country. We've really built a very diverse team as a result.
That's brilliant. And how many days are you in the office and how many are they working from home?
I think it's dependent on the work and the project, because they'll be working sort of on different things within our directorate, but also then across the rest of the organisation. So that's quite exciting. So I would say no 2 weeks look the same. So last week, for example, we brought our whole directorate, I think all 60 of us together for the first time. We were up in Manchester for 2 days. Previous week, I think I've been up in Cardiff. I'll be in London. So the same sort of applies, that we sort of go where the work is. And sometimes we'll be out with our stakeholders. I think one of the team is in the Midlands today doing some filming. It's very much led by the work and what we need to do with each other.
And is that quite difficult sometimes as a manager to be here, there and everywhere? How do you find that balance?
Yeah, it can be difficult. I mean, I quite like the variety of it, because it means that when I do have FaceTime with my team, you're really leaning into almost putting the laptop away and just building ideas through conversations or trying to get under the skin of something, or it's that human to human stuff that you can't really do when you're sat at a laptop. So it provides a bit of variety to my working day, because sometimes we can be sort of feel like we're chained to the emails or chained to writing stuff on our computers. So, but I'm not going to say it's easy, and I don't know if anyone's truly cracked how you make hybrid working work. It takes a lot of consideration and effort, but I think the gains that we get from it are really good. So yeah, if I look at my team, we've got such a variety of different backgrounds, skill sets, people who've had caring responsibilities and been able to flex with that. My team's very neurodivergent. As I said, the benefits have been brilliant for it.
Do you think actually that they've been, one of the appeals for them is the business because it operates like that?
Oh, 100%. I think when we do our staff engagement surveys, I would say the ICO's approach to flexible working comes out really high, and I don't think I've worked anywhere else that takes this approach. I mean, the approach was born out of the pandemic, but it's really kind of stuck around, and we'll be moving to a more city centre location next year when we move to Manchester. And people want to come into the office. It's not like that there isn't that desire, but I think that flexibility has enabled us to hire staff from all across the country. We've benefited from people that otherwise would just not be able to do this kind of work.
Great. Moving on then, can you explain more about your agency partnership and who you do work with? Because you did mention that most of it is handled in-house, but I presume that some of it isn't.
Yeah, so as I say, most of our work is handled in-house, but as we sort of scale up some of the ambitions of what we want to do, so we've made a real big push, I think, over the last few years to position comms and engagement as a strategic function, so not just something that is there to sort of put out a press release at the end or put some stuff on the website. We are here to help shape our regulatory goals and show how the work that we do contributes to those outcomes, and so that a lot of that is around how we help drive behaviour change, whether how people act on their information rights or how businesses think about how they approach data protection. We want to show that we can help contribute to the changes in what people think, feel and do. And so as we've changed those kind of ambitions and that they've got bigger, we've wanted to deliver bigger campaigns and bigger campaign type work. And so that has been a challenge because obviously we're handling a high volume of things day to day in terms of stuff that the business is working on and that we're having to manage internally and externally. You only have to look at any given day to see how many data protection issues are constantly in the news, and we work across the whole economy. We're not a sector-specific regulator. So our agency partnership has really helped to build our bandwidth and muscle on some of that behaviour change campaign work. So the agency partnership that we developed, which actually fortuitously came on the back of our PRWeek win last year when we won in-house team of the year. We at that time went out to the market to find an agency partner to work with, and I think it really helped having that win under our belt because we did attract some brilliant names from across the industry at the very top of their game. And yeah, the agency that we're now working with is on one of those campaigns, and it's been a brilliant partnership. We see them as an extension of our team. They joined our away day session last week, so they are very much part of the wider team, not just on this work, but in helping us with some of our kind of wider skills and thinking too.
And which agency is it?
It's Shook.
Great. Another winner.
Yeah.
Another award winner.
Winners.
Yeah, so can you explain then a bit more about the pitch? What was it that you were looking for when you were looking to hire them?
So when we developed this pitch, this brief, it was focused on our work with, it was focused on our children's privacy work. So we do a lot to try and make sure that the digital world is safe for children, and that means making sure things like children's privacy is sort of folded into apps and social media platforms and things that children may be interacting with online. And for the first time, we wanted to do something that spoke to parents about how they can work with their children to make sure that kind of privacy is understood and that they're active in the choices that they make, rather than feeling like they're sort of on these platforms and things are being done to them that they have no control over. So that's what we've been working with Shook on. In terms of how we approach that, we are procurement led, but we have a very good relationship with our procurement teams, and we actually did a bit of a pre-market engagement before we went out with that brief, just to make sure that what we were trying to achieve was feasible, especially against the budget that we had set aside for this type of campaign work, and that we hadn't sort of missed any sort of obvious questions or points that might be barriers later down the line if we went out with the brief in full. So that pre-market engagement was really helpful because we got some great feedback, and it just made us sort of tighten up the brief and make it really sort of as focused as possible, given, I guess, the scale of some of the things that we're trying to address. And as I said, the focus has been on trying to sort of achieve behaviour change and developing really strong insight and a strategy that can help achieve that. So that was a clear requirement from the agencies that we wanted to hear from.
Excellent. And did you just run that by people you already know in the industry? How did you sort of collate that initial data to make sure that you got it right?
So it was via our procurement channels, but obviously reaching out to contacts and things as well who we knew were experts in this space. So it was again that close working between, I would say, comms and the procurement teams.
Brilliant. And then are you working on any upcoming campaigns that you can tell us about?
So aside from the one that I've already shared, yes, there's quite a few actually in the works. So we've got a campaign that we're working on that's more business focused, so looking at how we can support smaller businesses with the work that we do. I guess it's essentially trying to show them that data protection can be a how-to, especially if they're trying to innovate or to grow, rather than like a don't do, which I think it sometimes gets looked upon as. So that's just in the early works, and separately and completely differently, we're about to launch a campaign that helps people, or specifically care leavers, people who've left the care system, with subject access requests. So these are requests that you can make for your information by organisations that might hold information about you. And it's really pertinent in the care system because obviously lots of these individuals who've left, they'll have records that have been kept about their childhoods, about their identities, about their backstories, and it's helping those people get better quality access to the records and quality records themselves. Because often, it's a bunch of papers completely in the wrong order, large sections redacted, and these are people trying to make head or tail of what's happened in their lives, and what they're getting back doesn't really help them do that. So this is a campaign to try and help sort of all parties that are involved in those records really help understand like the precious information that they hold and how they can make sure that the people who need to understand their own stories get that kind of respect and quality of information.
And do you find it, when you're looking at those sort of campaigns, obviously it's a very serious nature, how you manage to get the personal in to get that message in?
So as in, how do we bring it back to people? Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the ethos that runs through everything that we do. Often I think data protection can be looked as like an admin exercise or about, a tick box or some boring process or system, and everything that we do in terms of our comms and engagement is about bringing it back to people, because that's what it's about. Data isn't about protecting data, it's about protecting people. And so we try and do that in ways where we either connect into people's real experiences or make the kind of information that we're trying to convey relatable and very sort of human focused. I think that's come through in lots of the issues that we've handled, whether that was the crisis around the police service of Northern Ireland when they had their data breach, or even if it's just trying to sort of communicate some like advice on what a business could do. We try and do that in a way that's creative and that might tap into things that we do know people actually care about, rather than just repeat the information that might be on our website.
So you're an experienced comms professional, I think we can definitely say. So in your view, what breaks down an agency relationship? What should comms pros be watching out for?
I would say the biggest thing is making sure that there's honesty on all sides, and where we've really valued our agency partners is where they felt that they can push back or they can ask questions that challenge us. So, that might be around honesty around what we can actually achieve with the budget, or, if we have to adjust some of our expectations against like the KPIs that we're trying to reach based on, again, like the resources that we're able to put in. Even things down to, the brief. When you're very close to the subject matter, you might not always see some of those kind of holes in the brief. You might think you've got a really watertight brief and that sets out the problem. So I really value where there is that kind of honesty and constructive challenge. And one of the best things in the process that we've been through at the moment has been like those questions that might have kind of originally for us seemed like they were outside the brief, but they've helped us consider things that we might either want to bring into scope or definitely keep out of scope. And it's just resulted in, I think, a bit more of like a trust on both sides and kind of an agile way of working. So we're not being completely sort of stuck to what we originally thought we wanted to do or what we originally set out in the brief, that actually through that kind of way of working and that kind of honest conversation, we've iterated to, I think, reach a much better result.
And have you, obviously anecdotally we're hearing that, budgets are becoming tighter and it is harder, and obviously the C-suite wants more from that as well. Are you finding that, or have you found that actually you're getting more of maybe the share of marketing, or what's your experience in-house?
I think being able to demonstrate our value is the key to what gives us the buy-in internally, not just in terms of like budgets, but in terms of a seat at the table. I now sit on our exec team, so I'm part of the leadership of the ICO, and I think a large part of that has been the ability to articulate how what we do adds value to the regulatory work that the ICO does. So we're not here just for managing reputation or improving sort of visibility of our work. We're here to help directly achieve some of the goals that we set ourselves as a regulator. So that means, how do we capture and measure the impact of our work, not just project to project, but month to month? How do we play that back to the senior leadership team? Every month we will share some of our outcomes, and we try and really tie those to either some of the business goals or what we call real world impact. So how has the work that we've done and delivered made a real difference out in the real world? And we also package that up with like really clear actionable insights and takeaways that our senior leadership team can go and take back to their teams. And I think that really helps to grow the understanding of what comms can do and the value that we can bring. which I guess in turn has helped us with things like budget, but also, as I said, most importantly, that seat at the table right at the start of work.
So it sounds like a lot of it is just an education piece.
It's a constant education piece. It's never a job done, Siobhan.
Going back to the pitch process then, what would you say are your do's and don'ts when in a pitch process?
I think that knowing a little bit about the organisation helps. When I think about the ICO, we work very closely with other regulators who might be in a similar space to us. So being able to demonstrate you understand like what we do versus what others do, but helps again just bring that kind of reassurance that you know who you're pitching for and how we might play into the wider economy. Really simple one, answer the brief. I think that's one that sometimes doesn't always get answered to full. And again, if the brief doesn't make sense or you think we've missed something, we always welcome that feedback because then we can adjust accordingly. Being really sort of authentic to the examples that you share. I think there's been a couple of instances I can remember, not just in this job, but in previous ones where something might look good on paper, but when you have the conversation and you kind of scratch a little bit beneath the surface, things can quickly feel like they've come apart. So being really, authentic on the examples that you're sharing so that you can stand by them and stand them up to a bit of scrutiny.
Do you want to see really elaborate uses of what you could do with the campaign, or, do you want to be wowed in that way or not?
I think it depends on the brief. I mean, I would say we are keen to be creative. What we're trying to communicate is quite a complex subject. It can be a bit dry at times. So we are looking for sort of thinking that is a little bit outside the box, but it does need to be sort of relevant and suitable to the brief itself. And it's got to obviously fit our sort of tone of voice as a regulator. But I would hope that, there would be a bit of creativity. We don't have to be sort of completely dry or straight in how we do all our communications. And I always say, like, regulation needs to speak the language that people speak, not just the language of the law. So I think definitely creativity can go a long way in helping with that.
When in the pitching process should they discuss the budget?
I would like to hear that discussed quite early on. When we've gone out with briefs, we've been very clear about our budget as well as like our desired outcomes. And as I said, that's why that pre-market engagement was really helpful, because it helped us sort of understand whether we were in the right ballpark, if we needed to adjust slightly. But I think when we've received inputs for the briefs that we've gone out to market with, we've really valued having clear direction on budget early on, because I think otherwise you get sort of too excited and you get too far down the process and you realise that actually all the stuff that you got excited about might not be in scope of what you were able to do.
Moving on, cyber attacks and data breaches, as you've mentioned, are a key concern for businesses. And obviously recently the ICO was recognised, as you mentioned, for its work on the Police Service of Northern Ireland data breach at the awards. And I was just wondering what advice then you would give PR and comms professionals if a client is facing a data breach and they're having to manage the comms.
Yes. Oh, big question. So, I mean, the first thing I would say is just remembering that data breaches have people behind them in terms of the data that has been breached. And I think that's a really important insight to keep front and center. One of the other campaigns that we ran, called the Ripple Effect, was all about data breaches, especially ones that impacted people who might be in vulnerable situations. And the thing that came loud and clear when we did our research with them was that they got really infuriated when organizations fobbed off the breach as an admin mistake. And I think that kind of speaks to how lots of organizations see the work that we do, data protection. It's a tick box, it's a bit of admin, but actually the data that you're holding could be some of the most sensitive data relating to people, and it can have a huge impact on their lives if that information is mistakenly shared or stolen. So I think being really clear about the fact that it's about people, I think really shifts the mindset of how you handle a breach or how you handle the information in the first place. Lots of people, aside from being infuriated that it was sort of just dismissed as an admin breach, they just never felt organizations took it very seriously. So the first thing we always say, there's obviously the practical things that an organization must do. So, obviously assessing the scale of the breach and potential harm to people involved, and there is a duty to report to the ICO within 72 hours of a breach occurring. But thinking about how you communicate with the people that might have been affected by that breach, making sure that there's not a delay in notifying them if that's necessary, and how you communicate with them, your tone of voice, like acknowledging the impact that it might have had on them. Lots of the impacts often last well beyond the immediate weeks or months of a breach. Like, we had people come back to us, and 10 years on, they're still living with the repercussions of some of these data breaches, especially where it's very special, sensitive information that's been shared. So being empathetic, not being sort of patronizing. I think people can kind of read through when it feels like you're just sort of handing out platitudes and you don't really mean it in terms of the action that you're then following up with. But yeah, I would say acknowledging the mistake, the extent of the impact, and handling it with empathy, like really putting yourselves in their shoes of like, what would you do if it was your information that had been unwittingly shared and it was really sensitive stuff that could put their life at harm, as we saw with the PSNI data breach. And then thinking of some of the practical steps of what needs to be done, both in terms of the people affected but your own organisation, and making sure that the lessons are being learnt and that you're on the front foot in handling it internally, but also communicating what you're doing externally. So, talking about any sort of checks that you put in place to prevent further breaches happening, how you're working to safeguard the information that might have been leaked, how you're working with your customers, and obviously how you're working with us. I think all those things can really help shore up trust, especially given that will be massively affected after a breach.
That's great advice there. And obviously, PR and comms professionals are often privy to really sensitive information and personal client data. Are there any obvious mistakes that they need to avoid?
Yes. I mean, again, bringing it back to the people, if you're thinking about this less through the lens of like, oh, this is data, but this is actually really sort of sensitive information about people, I think that mindset can really help shift some of the behaviours about how people handle information. Often some of the things that we see are really like obvious things that just like the basics that have just not been gripped properly. So for instance, how are you storing information? Who has access to it? Is that information secure? Is it like locked under a password? If you've had ex-employees leave your organization, do they still have access to some of this client and sensitive information? Even just having a plan, if something were to go wrong, knowing exactly like who's going to like lead to that response and what you're going to do. I said like a lot of the time it is about just getting the basics right. We talked about hybrid working, so what is your kind of policies in the office. Like things like clear desk policies can help make sure that sensitive information isn't unwittingly shared. Likewise, if you've got staff working from home, making sure that they've looked after information. The other obvious mistake that we often see is documents that might not have been redacted properly or incorrectly named. So we've all, I'm sure, made an error where we've attached the wrong document and then it might contain some sensitive information. So it's thinking through some of those things. In the age of AI as well, I think there's a lot to think about in terms of how people are using personal information, personal data. And again, if you just kind of keep in mind that it is often information relating to people. So I would say just be like really transparent with your customers and clients about the information that you're asking from them, how it's going to be used, how like long you're going to be storing it. Because I think they'll often might have a say in some of that. If you're using children's data, then special considerations apply, and you can find out more information on the ICA's website about that. If you're using AI, thinking about again how that information is going to be used by that AI system, if it's going to be used to train other parts of the service, because again there might be sort of considerations to make. So I think there's a lot that can be done. It's just, I think, having that mindset that this isn't just like an admin tick box. Often you're dealing with other people's lives, so thinking through like some of those basic steps can go a long way in making sure that information is kept secure and protected.
Brilliant. And as we approach the end of 2025, I was wondering what your predictions are for next year.
Oh, we're already looking into our crystal ball, are we?
Always.
I mean, I've just mentioned AI. I think we're just going to see more uses of that. Maybe less as like a side of desk tool, maybe more kind of strategically. I think that's going to be really interesting in terms of the kind of shape and nature of the skills across our industry, right from junior level all the way through to senior leadership. I don't know exactly how that's going to look, but I think that's going to start, you're going to start seeing the impact of that in terms of how teams are set up, in terms of how we recruit, and the kind of skills that we'll be looking for. I think the other part of that is how people get information is going to start changing. We've already seen the impact of like GEO in terms of search engines. I think we're going to see more micromedia. We're already kind of looking at how we get information out in different ways. I think like newsletters and kind of micro-influencers will sort of have a bit more of a rise. Definitely more sort of channel fragmentation, which I think is a challenge, but also maybe an exciting opportunity. We don't all have to be going after the same ways and same methods of getting our information out. But it will definitely make it a bit harder to get communications out en masse.
And how do you think it's going to impact your team then? Because obviously you've mentioned there AI, that there's opportunities, but there's also risks with that. So I was just wondering, and recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, we're already, using AI tools as part of how we work day to day. And as part of that, we've published our AI use policy to sort of help other organisations sort of be guided by what we're doing as the data protection regulator. I wish I could predict into the future and tell you exactly how it's going to impact my team. I mean, I hope it releases a bit more ability to sort of be not so chained to desk and put in the kind of human interventions into the things that matter, like whether that's, coming up with brilliant ideas or sort of the relationships end of our business, whether that's working with different types of journalists or influencers or, the stakeholders that we have to interact with, the stuff where I think you do need humans. But it's hard to say. Hopefully we get to not have to be chained to our desks and do all that kind of stuff as much because we've got the benefits of AI. But I don't know. I wish I could exactly predict what my team will look like in a year's time as a result of the increasing use.
We'll come back in a year's time and have a chat again then, Angela, about that. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Angela, for speaking on today's episode, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast. Do check out PRWeek.co.uk for all the latest news and all of our great events too that are coming up in 2026, as we were just discussing. And if you enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PR Week's Beyond the Noise podcast. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.